After a decade of operation, the Toyota Automatic Loom Works established an automotive division in 1933 and soon began producing a copy of the Chevrolet 3.4-liter overhead valve 207 cubic inch stove bolt straight six, with the focus initially being on the G1 truck, inspired by trucks from the U.S. Approximately 480 were built before they chose to change the spelling of their name, effectively becoming Toyota instead of Toyoda. The first car arrived in 1936 as the Model AA, with styling inspired by the Chrysler Airflow. It was 187 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase and 3,300 pounds, and more than 1,400 would be made over its 8-year run. It would see updates in 1943 to become the Model AC, up to 192 inches long. But as focus had turned towards the war, only 115 would be made, half after the war using leftover parts, as production immediately after the war was limited to primarily commercial trucks for reconstruction, at least until the reform policies began in 1948, allowing for the return of car production. After studying designs in Germany, the new post-war Model SA went in a different direction than earlier models, much smaller at 150 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and 2,600 pounds, moving to a smaller and simpler 1-liter flathead 4, and it was only offered as a coupe. This would also be the first model to use the Toyopet name to distinguish it from more traditional Toyota models. But the company was struggling, perhaps saved by orders by the U.S. Army to produce military Jeeps for the Korean War. These bigger Jeep BJs used the updated B-Series Toyota truck engine that had been based on the Chevrolet unit. Soon, the National Police Agency would be making orders for them as well, and they would go into regular production in 1953 as the Land Cruiser. There was also a new RH Super Sedan that saw many improvements, including more modern styling using a body made by Mitsubishi, a new 60-horsepower 1.5-liter 4 that returned to overhead valve, and it was backed by a 4-speed manual transmission. Mid-decade saw many changes, including an updated and revised Land Cruiser. The Super was replaced by the Master, which shared its platform with the stout pickup, and the bigger Crown was introduced. It was the first car with body and chassis fully developed by Toyota, and was 169 inches long on a 99-inch wheelbase, and 2,500 to 2,700 pounds. But initially it used the same 1.5-liter engine, and was aimed at fleet sales. Around the same time, Toyota introduced the Toyo Ace route truck, or cab-over commercial truck. In 1957, the Master was replaced by the Corolla, 154 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, and powered by a 1-liter inline 4. The company was quickly expanding into export markets, even bringing the Crown to the U.S. by decade's end. But quality issues and high cost for the size kept sales minimal, while car names had become variations of Crown, including Corona and Tierra, and there would be a boom in the Japanese economy, making for better roads and an increase in car ownership, allowing for expansion of products and gains in quality control, leading to the introduction of the Publica for 1961, a smaller car starting at 390,000 yen. It was 139 inches long on an 84-inch wheelbase and 1,300 pounds, powered by a 700cc horizontally opposed twin with an available 2-speed Toyo Glide automatic. An upgraded version of the cab-over route truck was introduced in 1963 as the Dyna, and in 1965 they introduced the Sports 800. With 44 horsepower, it was only 141 inches long on a 79-inch wheelbase and 1,300 pounds, and the top-of-the-line Crown gained an available 2.6-liter V8, providing around 113 horsepower. But it was the third-generation Corona that would start to make the brand successful in export markets, including the U.S. An improved image allowed for halo cars such as the 2000 GT, although only 351 were built over its 4 years. It also put Toyota in a position to purchase a 17% stake in Daihatsu and to sign a manufacturing agreement with Hino Heavy Industries, which would lead to the new Hilux pickup to replace the Stout Light, as well as an increase in truck offerings such as the Hi-Ace. The big news was the introduction of the Corolla, 154 inches long on a 90-inch wheelbase, which included a sportier Sprinter coupe. They were available with a 1.1 or 1.2 liter engine, providing 60 to 65 horsepower in the U.S., where it started at only $1,700. 1968 saw the introduction of the Mark II, a bigger version of the Corona sold alongside the regular version. And there was a new Century, a bigger replacement for the Crown 8, with a bigger 3-liter V8 engine. In standard form, it was 202 inches long on a 113-inch wheelbase and 3,900 pounds, with 148 horsepower. But longer versions were soon added, including a limousine. The cab-over truck line would expand with smaller versions as the Mini Ace and the less small Light Ace. There was a new mainstream sporty model for 1971, sold as the Celica, and offered with a 5-speed manual. It was 164 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase and weighed 2,000 to 2,600 pounds, powered by a 1.4 or 1.6 liter 4 with up to 113 horsepower. And it was based on the new Carina, which was offered in 2- and 4-door sedans and wagons. Starting in 1973, there would be a new upmarket version of the Publica called the Starlet, which would soon replace it. In the late 70s, the Mark II would begin to be marketed as the Cressida in some markets. There was a new Tercel marketed as a junior version of the Corolla, and there was also a variant of the Carina called the Celica Camry, marketed as a sedan Celica. And there would be a 6-cylinder version of the Celica, known as the Supra. They would also start to introduce more luxury-oriented variants of models, such as the Mark II-based Cresta. Toyota entered the personal luxury coupe market with the Soarer in 1981. There was a new Camry for 1982 as part of the transition to front-wheel drive that was intended to replace the Corona in export markets. And import restrictions would have Toyota working to set up production facilities in Europe and the U.S., including the NUMMI joint venture with GM that would lead to a version of the Corolla being sold as the Chevrolet Nova. The Sprinter Trueno would come to the U.S. in 1984 as the Corolla GTS, and the mid-engine MR2 sports car was also introduced, both using a 1.5 or 1.6 liter 4 with horsepower ranging from 70 to 122. At the same time, Toyota introduced a 2-door wagon version of the Hilux pickup as the Surf or 4Runner. The Supra would become a separate model from the Celica for 1987. And with decades in, Toyota would create a new luxury division aimed at competing with the luxury brands from Germany. Starting with the LS400, it undercut the price of European models with a higher level of reliability, although the most popular models would be those based on existing Toyotas, specifically the Camry-based ES and RX. But model sharing was common among the divisions, with variants of the same car sold as different models in different markets. A trend Toyota would be expanding on, but that didn't mean there weren't unique cars to each division or market. And the 90s would see expansion into new market segments, with things like the Tercel-based Paseo Coupe in 1991. And sporty and larger and better equipped models would gain popularity, particularly in Japan. But it was the realm of light trucks where there would be significant strides forward, starting with the larger T100 pickup in 1993. The first step for the brand moving into the full-size truck market, although the Land Cruiser had already come close to expanding into that realm on its own. Then there was the RAV4 of 1994, effectively replacing the 4-wheel drive Corolla wagon, and creating the cute ute crossover segment that's so popular today. And the far less successful Mega Cruiser military vehicle, inspired by the Humvee. In 1995, the Avalon was introduced, replacing the Cressida in some markets, including the U.S., and the Tacoma pickup was introduced, primarily for markets in the Americas. Then 1997 brought the Prius, a small economy car that would popularize the hybrid. The same year, the Camry would become the best-selling car in the U.S., perhaps encouraging them to introduce a touring coupe variant as the Solara in 1999. And before decade's end, Toyota had taken a controlling interest in Daihatsu. For the new millennium, they replaced the Tercel with the Echo in some markets, which seemed like a stumble for the growing brand, much like the T100 pickup had. But its replacement, the Tundra, helped correct at least some of that. And there would soon be a wagon version sold as the Sequoia, which was then joined by the minivan-based Highlander. And the tall Corolla wagon would return to the market as the Volts, Matrix, or Pontiac Vibe, while the Supra was discontinued, having disappeared from the U.S. market 4 years earlier. The Premio and Allion replaced the Carina and Corona, while Toyota would take over their longtime partner, Hino, and form a partnership with PSA to build cars and brands. 2003 would see the introduction of the new youth-oriented brand, Scion, which was basically just cheap, quirky vehicles, while the entry-level Toyota in many markets was the Yaris that replaced the Tercel and Echo as of 2005. In 2006, the retro FJ Cruiser was introduced, inspired by the original Land Cruiser, but sharing more with the 4Runner than the actual Land Cruiser of the time. Two-door models would start to disappear, starting with the Soarer, followed by the Celica the next year, the MR2 or MRS after that, and finally the Solara in 2008, which didn't seem to hurt, as Toyota became #1 in global sales that year. They would be hit by a number of major recalls over the next few years, with the largest being the sudden acceleration issue, and the faulty airbag issue that had impacted several brands. And naturally, disasters such as earthquakes and tsunamis impacted their supply chain, none of which seemed to do any damage to Toyota's reputation for reliability. A joint venture with Subaru would bring a sporty coupe back to the line, initially using a 2-liter horizontally opposed 4. It would be sold as the Toyota 86, Subaru BRZ, and Scion FRS. The hydrogen fuel cell electric Mirai arrived for 2015. 2016 would be the final year of the Scion brand, but Toyota would purchase the remaining interest in Daihatsu. Thanks to a collaboration with BMW, there was an all-new Supra for 2020, but it was perhaps more BMW than Toyota. After the turn of the decade, they would create a development agreement with Build Your Dreams and purchase stock in Isuzu. And although they have continued to push the belief that the hybrid is a better answer, they released the full-electric BZ4X compact crossover for 2023. Toyota continues to offer a full line of vehicles, something fewer and fewer manufacturers are doing, with the Camry and Corolla remaining some of the best-selling cars on the market, and the RAV4 leading crossover sales, meaning that Toyota has become the brand to beat. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.